because they never liked the APNU, for whatever reason. I don't want to get into that. So logically, they're likely to move back to the PPP, and this is not necessarily opportunistically. This is life for them. They will move to a life certainty situation which they believe holds out better promise for them, because this is now a government they're dealing with rather than opposition. And they have a better bet with a government offering them things than an opposition offering them mere platitudes. And that's people. That's people. So I saw this morning when Mr. Granger said, in response to these people who seem to be pushing him to get on the street to protest, he said, you know, we have to be realistic. You know, this is the Christmas season. And I think he says everybody's looking to see where they can get an extra dollar. That's a highly realistic position. You know, the last time I made a statement, I don't want to repeat what I said about Christmas barrels, I was criticized. But Granger is more or less saying the same thing now, that people are not interested in protest now. They're interested in earning an extra dollar at this time. And the idea is not to put pressure on the people, but to put pressure on the PPP. Well, I could understand it from a political perspective, because he don't want to press his supporters to come out now and protest in the middle of Christmas season. They're not likely to come out. Plus, he's saying that that is compounded by the question of resources. This is the first time Mr. Granger has come out publicly and admitted that they have problems with resources. This question was asked of him months ago in Hatfield Street. He denied it. Now he's coming out and saying, after being pressured by the WPA, he's now admitting that they have a resource problem. Obviously, he's talking about financial resources. And whether they have to sell off property, or whether they have to sell off other things to raise money, or whatever the case may be, well, they have to put the house in order. You know, because he's right, these things need money. You got to pay the people to travel. You got to get them a lunch. You got to do something. You got to get them a bottle of drink. You know, you got to pay the transportation. Those things require money.
Just on the same
All right, let's Adam was on the floor before. Yes, Adam, come.
As a follow-up. Mr. Roy, you said that it's very realistic of Mr. Granger to point out that no one is going to actually come on the road and protest in Christmas season.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say there's some amount of strategy by the government to do this at a time where they know that people would not want to come out at this time and stand up for whatever they want, whatever they do?
Look, not necessarily, you know. The parliament, the recess ended at a particular time, right? I think it was sometime in October, the 10th of October. Comrade, we all live and grow in Guyana. We know that by the time you end October and you entering into the month of November, Christmas issues begin to percolate. The carols begin on the radio, the commercialization gets into full swing. It's not in full swing, but begins to gear up and so forth. All of us who live in Guyana know that. So this has nothing to do with strategizing this extension or this closing down of the parliament or the prorogation of the parliament. It just happens that it came at a time when, you know, we were almost at the end of the year. But I was pleased when I saw the president said at a function over the weekend that he's soon to make an announcement, you know, on the way forward. I saw that in one of the newspapers. This I think it was today. So let's see what is going to come out of that.
Sir, I wanted to talk about the Amerindians, and my question to you, sir, is how does the PPP see the Amerindians? As equal to the rest of the Guyanese society, or as a people who is lower than the average Guyanese?
No, well, let me tell you something. Speaking for myself as a Guyanese, as a person who's grown up in this country over the years, I have a tremendous respect for Amerindians. I never disrespect them. Irrespective of who, I might go into the interior see a logger with a three-quarter pants, a rubber slipper on his feet, and a torn t-shirt, and he's working in the logging industry, working hard. When you shake these people's hands, they're not like my hands. When you shake these people's hands, it's a rugged hand, hard work. and they are working so hard to go back to their families and the villages from where they come to, improve their lives. So I have a tremendous respect, and that respect is coming from the fact that I grew up in a party which also has a tremendous respect for the indigenous people of this country. So they must be treated like every other Guyanese, like every other Guyanese, So we don't see them at the lowest rung of any ladder or second-class citizens or anything like that. And the PBP, I think the government is of the same, and that is why, it established the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, the first ever in the country. It recognized this man, Campbell, who was the first Amerindian Member of Parliament, and it has done so many things for the Amerindian people. I don't think it has done that because it wants to bribe them or get votes from them. It's a genuine interest, and every government must do things for the indigenous people of this country. Must do it, bring them up to a certain level, so that they're able to enjoy the same benefits, the same rights like all of us who live on the coastline. And that's my conviction, and this is a reflection of how the party feels on this matter.
Sir, after 22 years in government, do you think your government has been able, your party as a government, has been able to make real headway in the development of the Amerindian communities? When you use your own examples, they're harder workers than you would be based on the tenderness of your hands.
No, my hands are usually pen and paper, but so my head is more thinking. But in life there's so many divisions and division of labor and things like that. That's what makes society so interesting. But you have Amerindians too, who are in the broadcasting field, who are in the journalist field, who are in the intellectual endeavor field, and so many other areas, arts and so forth. They have been so battered in the past that it will take years for us to bring them up to a certain level. But I think it has started. I think it started even when, during the 57 to 64 period, when the PPP was in the government, when we offered the first Amerindian scholarships to Amerindian people, young people, to come to the, what you may call the Ivy League high schools in Georgetown. I lived once with a group of them who were among the first that came to Georgetown to go to Queens, Bishops, St. Stanislaus, and so on. It's a long journey, and the journey has to continue. And I believe that, yes, we have made progress, but development for the Amerindian communities will have to continue to be a work in progress, as it is for many of us who live on the coastline as well.
And sir, just before you wrap up, there's all this talk about elections, the national elections. You're saying even your party, your supporters appear to want the national elections over the local government elections. Sir, clearly the party must be having discussions with the civic component of that coalition. Could you say whether or not the Prime Minister has indicated his unwillingness to run again for that position, having served since 1992, and whether or not the party is engaging other persons to be the running mate of whoever might be the presidential candidate for the PPP?
I said before that this is a package. When we settle on these issues, we'll make up a statement. But as far as Comrade Sam, as we call him, is concerned, and to answer your question directly, no, I haven't heard the Prime Minister or Comrade Sam issue any statement in respect to his, longevity in the Prime Ministership of this country in a negative or a positive way. He continues to work. I see him visiting many communities and so on. So he seems to have a certain energy level, which continues to put him in a, in good light in terms of what his portfolio responsibilities are. So no, we continue to discuss these things, but we continue to engage the civic component and others outside. I was reporting that we did meet with a number of different people at different activities and so on. So that's an activity that always has to continue.
Question. Mr. Roy, how worried is the party, or how how worrying it is for the party that a pilot who transported the president.
That what?
A pilot
Mm-hmm.
plane who transported the president on more than one occasion was caught in Puerto Rico smuggling a large amount of cash back to Guyana. And separate from the worry, how would you respond to rumors that this money he was bringing back was to fund the PDP election campaign?
I think that's utter garbage. The last one is utter garbage. We work hard at fundraising activities to raise our money. So, as the General Secretary of the PPP, I know nothing about that, and I would dismiss it outright. That's the last one you made about him bringing money for the PPP. Out of the question. There are two issues there. Not what is wrong with the President or the office of the President charting a flight, this plane, to take him on government business, a legitimate activity. It was not an illegal flight. There was nothing illegal about it. They paid for it. It was open. The plane was in the view of everybody. But there are certain sections of the media that is trying to make an issue out of this thing as though he committed something wrong. What wrong did he commit? What wrong did the government commit in chartering a plane to take the president to a destination in a particular time and bringing him back at a particular time so he could continue with his work? But you know, the thing is that efforts are being made to embarrass the president, embarrass the government. And you know, like the ombudsman said, that that Mr. What's his name was treated unfairly. No, not Arjun. That who? Mr. Jagdeo, yeah. Jagdeo was treated unfairly. You know, I want to say something on this one. Because I bought a file here and I was looking through this file here. It's interesting how the media covered this story. The Guyana Chronicle says on November the 29th, Ombudsman says Kaieteur News headline was extremely unfair. That is the Jagdeo, right? Good. Guyana Times headline on the same 29th says, media unfair to Jagdeo, Ombudsman. Kaieteur News now, Kaieteur News, on the same 29th says, NBS report, Ombudsman refutes luncheon and DPP's criticisms. Now, interesting. I am not a journalist by profession, I'm a journalist by compulsion. But when I look at these different headlines here, you know, you could see the mischief that is afoot, particularly in respect to the Kaieteur News article or headline. What is even more interesting in this one is that I hope, because he said at the end of his, this is what he said, and I quote, I made no such finding considering the former president in the media. There should be rules. This is the Ombudsman speaking. There should be rules. Now, some time ago, we issued a press statement when we said we wanted an oversight body. And the GPA, as reported in the iNews, said not so fast. This is what was said. Now, I think this is something that we must pay some attention to. And I hope that the media, even though they didn't want to listen to what I had to say, that there need to be rules on what people should say in an effort to bring down other people, to bring other people into disrepute, that the media or the relevant sectors of the media does take seriously what the Ombudsman said about there being rules. Because if we continue besmirching the reputation of people, and if we continue with this type of character assassination in sections of the media, contrary to what people might have said, and also not in sync with the need to have this oversight of the media, we will continue to have these problems. Now it's the ombudsman talking. Let me hear the criticism that will be made against the ombudsman now for calling for rules.
But sir, you're.
Let me, no. Let me hear the criticisms against the ombudsman for calling for the setting down of rules in the media.
Sir, there was a media monitoring unit that came under GCOM, and it was the government that you sit on and you're a part of that pulled funding for that project.
Okay,
So do you believe the government should then allow funding for that project? I think some international partners were interested in doing that, and your government said no.
I am not getting into, I would not wish at this point in time to get into that. Maybe some other time we could have a more enlightened discourse on that. All that I'm saying is that I heard the view of the distinguished ombudsman with respect to the reportage on this matter and his call for rules to be established to, address this matter. Let's deal with the ombudsman now.
Would
Could
I
I
be
get a quick follow-up on
public-
Abina's question, please?
Pardon?
Sir, just a quick follow-up on Abina's question.
On whose question?
Abina, about the...
No, but I notice everybody live up all of a sudden we are talking about the
Yeah,
media.
this is live and in, because you said, sir, that what is wrong with the president traveling on this jet, and the media is painting it as if he did something wrong. Isn't it
Yeah.
compromising the president's security, sir, if the Civil Aviation Authority seems to know nothing about the existence of this jet service, and the security for this particular jet is well, under the table, so to speak.
Well, did the Civil Aviation Authority issue a statement saying that they don't know that this plane operates from Guyana? Did they say that in clear, definitive, unequivocal terms?
The CCA has said that they do not know about this plane. They have
No,
no
that can't be
information
correct.
about it.
That can't be correct. That can't be correct.
But sir, there are concerns that this
That can't be
aircraft-
correct.
There are concerns that this aircraft was coming into Guyana, it was not being checked by customs, not being checked by immigration,
Where did those concerns come from?
from customs officers.
Who,
And they have
the
expressed
ones
that.
like that were colluding with Glenlal to hide the
No, it
motor
wasn't the
car?
airport. I don't know who colluded with who, but they have
Oh.
expressed concerns, sir. So aren't you concerned as a party in government about the security of your president if he is traveling on a plane
My friend,
that may not be checked by customs?
my friend, the question of security of the president was never, ever raised. The
No, I'm
question.
raising that.
No. I'm saying to you that the security of the president was never ever raised in respect to this matter. What was raised was that here was the president, this is the concocted story, here was the president traveling on a plane that had traveled on a plane. They didn't even do the investigations before they made the announcement. You see? So anything to do with the PPP or the government or officials of the government, they just automatically latch onto it and seek to paint it in a negative light.
But sir, how do you compare the PPP saying
Yep,
Mr.
all right,
Granger
man.
is embedded
I
criminals
wanted
by
to
attending a
challenge-
funeral
I wanted to
with
accuse
someone?
Mr.
Adam, let me have the floor,
Williams of
thank you.
standards.
And how do you compare that to Mr. Granger being at the funeral of a young man and being in a photograph with somebody giving the mother water who turns out to be somebody who was shot dead months or 2 years
Exactly.
later?
That was-
How do you compare that and the party saying he's a criminal for that? And the president traveling on this plane with this man who's been charged by the US
Association.
smuggling a good small piece?
Principle of association.
Listen
So-
to me.
how do you
Listen to
separate
me.
the two?
Listen to me. I hear a cameraman talking in the back. They think they should know their place at press conferences. I don't know at press conferences cameramen are supposed to express a view.
They can.
Not in my press conferences. Not at my press conferences.
Well, we can tell the camera room call.
I don't mind.
Neil, don't distract.
I don't
You're
mind.
talking about the
Because of the
association.
association.
Yeah. I am saying that there was nothing illegal, illicit, clandestine, or inappropriate in the president hiring this aircraft to take him on government business.
Good.
There's a cabinet decision on the matter that could be queried or could be asked for at any point in time through the HPS. The People's Progressive Party, as the political party in the government, sees no transgression whatsoever. None. No transgression whatsoever. If sections of the media wishes to invent or concoct or manufacture a story that seeks to place the administration in a bad light, and they publish that, we will have to answer that. And that is what freedom of the press is all about.
But sir, you haven't answered the question.
Mr.
You have
Judge.
accused the opposition leader of being in bed with criminals because he's in a photograph with a young man who was killed 2 years after that photograph, giving the mother of another young man water. The PPP has said the opposition leader is in bed with criminals based on that photograph.
Yeah.
Yet your president, the PPP's, the president of the country,
Who is the
the president of the country
Uh-huh.
has traveled on a jet
Mhm.
and was flown by
A criminal?
and was owned by this man who has been charged
Yeah.
in a very serious offense.
But
How
could
do you
we,
separate
could
the
we,
two?
could we wait to see what the United States justice system, how the United States justice system will deal with the matter? This thing hasn't been fully ventilated as yet.
See how you separate
The
the two?
no. In all fairness, we haven't heard the full disclosures in respect to this matters yet. We haven't seen everything as yet. We haven't heard anything as yet. The U.S. justice system will address their aspect of the matter. I am dealing with the Guyana side of this matter. The Guyana side of this matter is that the head of state of this country hired a plane legitimately to take him on government business. There was nothing illegal about that, nothing inappropriate about that. When the U.S. justice system addresses their side of the matter, well then we'll deal with that from the U.S. justice system side.
One last question, please.
And final question.
Mr. Roy, we now know over the weekend we got a revelation that Marriott has been pawned Marriott and adjoining state land.
Excuse me?
Pardon?
What word did you use?
Pawn.
Marriott Hotel has been pawned. Mortgage, if you prefer that word. Mortgage?
Uh-huh.
Great. No.
No. What did you say? Great. I didn't say yes or no to that.
No, great that we can move on.
Good that you understand.
Yes.
I just said uh-huh.
Okay, now the Marriott and the adjoining state land has been pawned for 29 million. This is million US, of course. This is because it's evident that the Republic Bank hasn't been able to gather investors to give a syndicated loan 1 million less than this amount. You said earlier that any project by the government is supported by the PPP. Now, is the PPP now concerned that the project it's supported is in, for want of a better word, shambles? Are you concerned if no one wants to invest in it? And are you seeing a pre-failure of this project?
Well, you used a lot of journalistic jargon there. I don't necessarily go along with. The only one that was missing was the embattled Marriott Hotel. You know, that's the only word you slipped up in not using. But you know, the intensity of the journalistic jargon that you used there with pawning and shambles, and I would want to disassociate myself completely from, because you haven't been able to produce any concrete evidence. You haven't been able to produce any You have not been able at my press conference to produce any documentary evidence for me to examine in my own position as the General Secretary. Speculative, hearsay, journalistic, journalese is not my forte.
But Mr. Roy, when you bring,
We're going to send the
All right.
Gazette to him.
but
He
Mr.
don't read the
But
Gazette.
when he brings the statements on PPP and what PPP does,
don't-
he doesn't bring evidence on what
He
the
know
PPP
that
did.
too.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Roy, just to answer my question from the on links.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Welcome to the PPP Weekly Press Conference. With me here is our General Secretary. We'll be reading two statements, after which we'll be taking questions. Yes?
Thank you. The first statement reads as follows. The People's Progressive Party welcomes and commends the efforts of the General Registrar's Office, currently working in Amerindian communities to ensure that our First Peoples are equipped with birth certificates to be registered. The possession of this important source document allows every Guyanese the opportunity to be enfranchised and registered on the list of electors. Enfranchisement is a right that the PPP has always vehemently advocated in an effort to preserve this constitutional right of all eligible Guyanese. With regards to Amerindians, our party has fought for their right to be heard and for them to have a vote like everyone, like every other citizen. History will show that the PPP has been relentless in its efforts to remove Amerindians from being the second-class citizens which they were under the previous PNC administration. In this context, it is in this context that our party condemns the calls by the PNC under the guise of the APNU for the GRO not to proceed with its current endeavor to have our Amerindian citizens equipped with birth certificates. These calls are reminiscent of and in keeping with the history of the PNC, which is to keep Amerindians marginalized. During its tenure in office, the PNC sidelined Amerindians and shamelessly continues with this trend up to this day. Only a few months ago, this effort by the PNC to make Amerindians second-class citizens was demonstrated when it joined with the Alliance for Change and inhumanely cut the entire capital budget of the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. That was money that the PPPC government had allocated to push ahead with unprecedented development in Amerindian communities in an effort to better their lives. That was money that would have continued to give young Amerindian boys and girls the opportunity to benefit from Guyana's transformation through modernization. That was money earmarked for Amerindian land titling and demarcation. Further, the PPP is not unmindful of the recent rabid and seemingly inciting diatribe expressed by the Working People's Alliance, calling for intensified protest actions. Much has been said about the fear and destruction such action brought in the past on our country and its people. That aside, like the AFC, the WPA is desperately trying to ride on the back of the APNU in an effort not to become obsolete. From its utterances, it appears that the WPA has learned nothing from its past reckless and adventuristic behavior that caused it to become irrelevant. It now seeks to push the APNU onto that path of destruction. Casting blame on the PNC APNU for not being more forceful in disrupting the country, it appears as if the WPA is now biting the hand that gave it a new lease of political life. It is the deep divisions in the APNU, AFC, and within the opposition grouping as a whole that have made it extremely difficult for any cohesive plan or roadmap to be drawn up to destabilize the government, according to the wishes of the WPA. This is evident from the poor responses to the call for protests. More so, our party would like to commend Guyanese who have forthrightly refused to participate in such actions which could lead to undermining the progress made over the years. The popular refusal must be seen as a form of protest in itself against the opposition, given that our people prefer a stable and prosperous society, rather than the disorderly and riotous, quote-unquote, taking to the streets position that the WPA is now proposing. Guyanese are tired of the opposition's politics of protest and the destruction it brings. They want peace, progress, and prosperity, and the continuation of the effort to create a brighter future for all. they are aware that the opposition protest action will not put bread on their table, nor will it improve their daily livelihoods. Their refusal to support destructive protests is an indication that they would not be easily hoodwinked and are much smarter than the opposition thinks. The PPP would like to assure all Guyanese, and in this context, particularly our Amerindian brothers and sisters, that the party will never sit idly by and allow the PNC, now APNU, to dehumanize and stigmatize any citizen. Amerindians must rest assured that the PPP will continue to work assiduously for their best interests. In this regard, our party supports the GCOM's effort in ensuring the enfranchisement of every eligible Guyanese. The party urges GCOM to step up its public relations efforts with regard to the commencement of the 7th cycle of continuous registration. In addition, our party calls upon the relevant authorities to be cognizant of the seemingly inflammatory statements being expressed by some within the opposition aimed at intimidating Amerindians. The next statement reads as follows. The People's Progressive Party condemns the Alliance for Change for its use of threatening and inflammatory language against the PPP and its leaders, more particularly former President Bar Jagdeo and Finance Minister Dr. Ashley Singh. These statements come on the heels of similar threats by the APNU, which lends credence to the popular held perception that the AFC is taking its cue from its senior partner in the opposition alliance against the PPP and its civic component. The threats emanating from the opposition camp is reminiscent of the days of PNC dictatorship when there was political persecution against anyone who dared to stand in the way of that administration. Such ominous threats cannot be dismissed as hot air emanating from a desperate and power-hungry opposition. Under the PNC regime, any indication of opposition, real or imagined, would have resulted in victimization or dismissal, or, in the case of Dr. Walter Rodney, death. The PPP is proud of its record of advocating and promoting an environment of free speech and independent thinking, which sadly is now under threat. It is clear that the opposition parties have failed in their efforts to bring down the PPPC administration and are now resorting to all manner of threats and subterfuge to intimidate and drive fear and insecurity among the populace. Our party wishes to assure the Guyanese people that it will not sit idly by and allow the social and economic gains scored by the current administration to be undermined by an uncaring and power-hungry opposition. The party will fight tooth and nail to preserve the integrity and honor of our party and its leaders from opposition threats. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. There you had two statements.
Yes, President Moran, Uncle, you spoke about the poor response to the protest. Mr. Graduate said that he will be keeping pressure on the PPP in light of what you just said, what is being termed poor response to the protest. What's your response to that?
Well, you know, this party has always been subjected to pressures while in opposition and while in the government. So that is not something new. We have been responding to these pressures, and how pressures are defined is a matter that is yet left to be seen. So whatever shape or form the pressures might take, I think our party is strong enough to withstand those pressures and to find a way to move the country forward.
Oh,
Adam Harris, sir, this is your second statement, the one about political Richmond.
Yeah.
You and President Ramazan admitted that there were corruption in the society. And the opposition parties are talking about investigating some of those who might have been involved in corruption. Why do you see that as a witch hunt?
Well, you know, I saw the Starbuck News editorial this weekend, and I was appreciative of the first part of the editorial, where it actually, I think condemn is a rather strong word, where it spoke very strongly, put it that way, about Mr. Granger's statement that he will punish persons, and we assume that he's speaking about PPP person because he never said no, he wasn't. And how Mr. Granger could assume that responsibility to punish anybody in this country without due process, without presenting evidence, because it seemed to us that these would be political trials, reminiscent of the Reichstag trial. So that is why we took a very strong position on that matter.
About news, the news source. Mr. Rohi, last week your party issued a press statement that referred to Shaquille Grant, the young man who was killed by 3 police officers who were charged with his murder. And referred to him as a criminal. Was that an error on the part of the party? Or
I did see that. I didn't have a chance to recheck on that, but I'll have to certainly recheck on that to see, because I didn't, I don't control all the statements issued from our party headquarters. But I did see that appear and some questions being asked, so I'll have to go back and check on that. And if there's a clarification that needs to be made, I certainly do that.
Just the president on Sunday announced that he will be making a public disclosure soon on the way forward. Has the party been engaging the president on any of these discussions?
Well, I keep saying that the president is a member of our party executive committee. The president shares with us his perspectives on these matters. Usually we would discuss those perspectives, and in the final analysis, after the discussion, we would come up with, we'd come up with perspectives that coincide usually with his having regard to the fact that on these matters, OP is usually better informed than we are at the political level. So on a matter like that, we would, we would obviously be taking guidance, taking the cue, so to speak, from the government and how they have opted to pursue an agenda on this matter. And obviously, as I said before, it would have certain political inputs from the party, but in the final analysis, the take is with the government.
Mr. Rickard Campbell, could you say if there are any ongoing discussions either at the party or government level in keeping with the president's promise to announce or to hold local government elections?
In keeping with what?
The president's promise to hold local government elections within the second quarter, to arrive at a definite date for that.
Well, my reading of the situation, or our reading of the situation at the political level, is when you hear the AFC speak, when you hear the APNU speak, the leaders of those parties speak, it seems as though the question of local government elections is now out of the question, and the focus is now on general and regional elections. Mr. Granger himself has been calling for general and regional elections. I get the impression that our supporters on the ground are of the view that we should go to general and regional elections. There may be some lingering thoughts, or there may be some in the political arena that may be harboring thoughts about local government elections, but it seems to me that all indications show that the preferred option of most of the political parties is to go for general and regional elections. The people, as I said, our supporters on the ground are saying that too. But we haven't taken a policy position to say that, as a matter of policy, the PPP is now prepared to go for general elections rather than local government elections. The jury is still out on that, but as I said, looking at how the wind is blowing, it looks as though we're heading for another general and regional election.
So, Neil Marks, Capital News. With the insight that you're getting from Open, could the president be leaning towards having a third party sort of try to threshold the issues between the two parties?
The president hasn't discussed that with us since the matter was aired publicly from his office. We haven't had any discourse at the party level
Could
with the
be
president.
inclined that way towards having an outside negotiator come in?
Not necessarily, because we've had so many. We would prefer to take the position that let us try to deal with this matter internally. I think we have the requisite resources, both human and otherwise, in Guyana to deal with this matter. Too often we tend to look on outside, and I'm not saying that outside support is not necessary, because, for example, at GCOM, we have the support of the European Union and the UNDP supporting certain actions, certain interventions, activities. But on a matter like this, I think that we need to look more internally than externally to resolve this matter. The experiences in the past have not been too, productive.
I meant whether external or internal. I meant like a third party to just somebody to get you two talking, because the people said they've been talking.
I think they will eventually have to come around to adopting a much more reasonable position. This position of saying no, that we don't want to talk. I mean, in which political culture does that exist? So they are appearing to be highly unreasonable in this debate that is now going on. And I think that is one of the issues that is also affecting the APNU, in the sense that, they are, I gather that there are a lot of people out there on their side who are suggesting dialogue to go and talk. But Mr. Granger has dug himself into another hole. And the question is, how does he come out of that, having said that he's not talking? But to say that you're not talking is not, in my view, a statesman-like position. Sometimes you have to rise above the fray and, take a more statesman-like position in, grasping whatever opportunities appear before you for the best interest of your supporters and of the country as a whole, because if the country doesn't move forward, your supporters suffer. If the country goes backward, your supporters suffer. All of our supporters suffer, not only the supporters of the AFU. And which enlightened politician or which statesman-like politician who wants to show his people that he can lead them out of bondage, so to speak, into the promised land, would want to behave like that? It doesn't make sense, and that's why I think he's coming under increasing pressure. But the thing is that, you see, as I said, you have all these tendencies within the party. Some are saying talk, some are saying don't talk. Which direction he's going is, is not very clear, because he said he hasn't made up his mind as yet. Whether he's going to talk. What is it that is required of him to make up his mind? And by the way, I don't think it is correct, scientifically speaking, to say that, okay, you put the people out of parliament, therefore, how could you expect them to talk? I think I saw some of you reporters who would sit in that section there where the media representatives sit, and would see how debates are conducted in the parliament. In the parliament, there is no room or space or ambience, so to speak, for dialogue. Everything is done on the basis of rules. Everything is rule-based. The debates are rule-based according to the standing orders. It's very rigid, and there's very little room for the kind of discourse, of an informal nature to take place. So what we're talking about, as I understand it, is they're moving into an environment that is much more relaxed, where the leaders could roll up their sleeves, you know, throw back, engage in talk, engage in, you know, discussions, engage in dialogue, for want of a better word. And over the days, over the weeks, probably over the months, would come to some kind of consensus on these matters. You can't do that in the parliament. The parliament is not set up for that kind of situation. So let them go somewhere, you know, where, you know, the atmosphere is more convivial to that kind of, you know, parlaying, as it were, and, you know, to discuss the matters, you know, serenely and in a more dispassionate way. Pardon? Wherever. It's for them to choose. It's for the leaders to choose, you know.
Mr. Rohi,
Oh, fine.
Mr. Rohi, your party has always put itself out as a party for workers and for workers' rights. This morning, a lot of public servants are not happy after getting news of the 5% and 8% increases over the weekend. What is the party's position on that increase? Do you think
We
it's
support
sufficient?
once it's a government increase, once it's an increase by the government, obviously the People's Progressive Party would support it. This does not mean to say that we are anti-working class or, you know, anything of that sort. Everything has to do with affordability. What can the budget afford? What can the country afford at this age? I am very, very certain that if the government could have afforded more through the Ministry of Finance, they would have given more. But I just want to say this, that I don't believe, and I am not aware that there are just a few people who sit in a smoke-filled back room, you know, dark somewhere, that sits down and plots and plans and says, no, we're not going to give them 10%, we're going to give them 8%, or, you know, they don't deserve that. And I don't imagine that happens at all, you know. So the PPP and the supports the government's offer to the public servants, and let's wait and see, because this only happened over